On the surface, 24-year-old Mia's life looked like something out of a music video. She worked at one of the busiest nightclubs in the city, an upscale place called Velvet Pulse, where the music never stopped and the drinks never dried. Every night, the flashing lights washed over her as she moved from table to table in a glittery black dress, balancing trays of cocktails and forced smiles. People came there to forget, to lose themselves. And Mia? She was no different, really, just better at hiding it. She had been living in this loop for almost 2 years now, ever since her mom passed away unexpectedly. The grief had split her world in two, before and after. She was once a promising dance student with dreams of teaching, but after the funeral, everything slowed down. Her friends drifted away, her ambition dulled, and she started working at Velvet Pulse to pay the bills and numb the ache. At night, she'd return to her small apartment that still had dance trophies collecting dust on the shelf, and stare at the mirror for long stretches of time, asking herself quietly, "Is this all I'm ever going to be?" She didn't hate her life, but she didn't recognize it anymore either. Deep inside, something whispered that this wasn't how her story was supposed to go. She just didn't know where to begin fixing it, or if she even had the strength. That night, like many before it, she showed up to work tired and on autopilot. But something was about to change, something that would break the cycle and force her to remember who she used to be, and who she still could become. Mia's first shift back after a week of calling in sick felt heavier than usual, not because of the workload, but because something inside her had shifted, subtly, but surely. She had spent the past week staring at old dance footage on her phone, videos of her spinning and smiling in a way she hadn't in years. It stirred something deep, something raw. The longing wasn't quiet anymore. That night, halfway through her shift, Mia found herself near the DJ booth when the club owner, Terry, pulled her aside. He wasn't cruel, but he had a sharp tongue. "You've been off lately," he said bluntly, not making eye contact. "You want to keep this job. You got to bring the energy back. We've got new girls lining up every week." It stung more than she expected. Not just the words, but the fact that she couldn't argue. She had let her spark fade. For a moment, she considered quitting right there, but pride stopped her. And fear. She had nothing lined up. No plan, no backup. Later that night, while cleaning up spilled drinks near the edge of the dance floor, she heard a voice she hadn't heard in over a year. "Mia." She turned and froze. It was Jess, her old dance partner. The two had grown up in studios together, shared hotel rooms at competitions, and even choreographed routines side by side. They were inseparable until Mia vanished from that world. Jess hugged her tightly. "I thought I'd never see you again. You just disappeared." Mia forced a smile. Life got messy. Jess didn't push. She just nodded. "Well, if life ever gets less messy, we're putting together a showcase. Small, local. Old faces, no pressure. Just dancing again. You should come by." The invite stuck in Mia's mind like a song on loop, but the idea of stepping back into that world felt impossible. Her body wasn't the same. Her confidence was paper thin. What if she embarrassed herself? That week, she tried to practice. In her apartment, with furniture pushed aside, she pulled up old routines and tried to follow along. But her balance was off. Her movements stiff. She fell. Twice. She even cried once, frustration boiling over into shame. But the tears weren't just pain. They were release. The first real emotion she had let herself feel in months. She wasn't there yet. Not even close. But for the first time in a long time, Mia wasn't numb. And that had to count for something. The night of the showcase arrived faster than Mia expected. She stood in the hallway outside the community theater's backstage room, hands trembling, heartbeat racing. Through the curtain, she could already hear the low hum of the audience settling in. Friends, families, dancers, and strangers. She hadn't been in front of a crowd like this in over 2 years. Every cell in her body screamed for her to turn around, to run, to disappear before anyone saw her fall apart. She looked at herself in the mirror, hair pulled back, stage makeup neatly applied, and a simple black leotard that felt strangely like armor. But what she noticed most were her eyes. They weren't as hollow as before. Fear was there, yes, but so was something else. Determination, a flicker of belief. Jess walked over, gently squeezing her hand. You ready? Mia took a breath. No, but I'm doing it anyway. As the music started and she stepped onto the stage, her mind nearly blanked. But then muscle memory took over. Old steps her body still remembered even if her confidence didn't. She moved, not flawlessly, but fully. She missed a beat. She recovered. Her timing was off. She smiled anyway. She let herself feel every second, awkward, free, alive. The turning point didn't come from nailing the performance. It came from allowing herself to be seen again, flawed, vulnerable, and trying. When the song ended, the audience clapped politely, but Jess grinned like they'd just won gold. And Mia? She stood there, breathless, sweating, heart pounding, and cried. Not from failure, but from relief, from release, from realizing that fear had ruled her long enough. She didn't need to be perfect to begin again. She just needed to show up, and she did. The days following the showcase felt strangely quiet, like the air had settled around Mia in a way it hadn't in years. She returned to work at Velvet Pulse, but something was different. The music still blasted, the lights still flashed, but she didn't feel like she was drowning in it anymore. She was no longer just surviving her nights. She was planning for something more. During breaks, she found herself sketching choreography ideas on napkins, looking up local studios that rented out space by the hour. She even texted an old teacher, asking if they ever needed help with beginner classes. Just small steps, but steps forward finally. Terry, the club owner, noticed the shift too. "You've been different lately," he said one night. "More alive, I guess." He didn't say it like a compliment exactly, but not like a warning either. Just an observation. And he wasn't wrong. Jess kept texting her, sending video clips from the showcase, talking about future performances. "We should do it again," she said. "People loved seeing you up there." Mia didn't argue this time. She said, "Yeah, I'd like that." The change wasn't easy. Some nights, she still felt like the old Mia. Numb, unsure, tired. But now she had something to hold on to. A version of herself that she could see again on the horizon. She knew healing wasn't a straight line, but at least she was finally on the road. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't waiting for life to change. She was making it happen. A few months later, Mia stood in a sunlit dance studio, not as a student, but as an assistant teacher for a beginner's class. The walls echoed with laughter and offbeat music as kids stumbled through their steps, smiling even when they got it wrong. Watching them, Mia felt something settle in her chest, a quiet kind of joy she hadn't felt in years. She only worked weekends, using the rest of her time to build something new. The transition wasn't perfect. She still had bills, doubts, and moments where the old fear crept in. But she didn't let it win anymore. She had faced the part of herself that was stuck and moved through it. Her relationship with herself had changed. She no longer avoided mirrors. She didn't just see someone getting by. She saw someone growing, someone healing, and maybe most importantly, someone trying. Looking back, Mia realized that the showcase wasn't just about dancing. It was about remembering her worth, even when she felt broken. It was about choosing to move forward, even when fear begged her to stay still. Her journey wasn't about a perfect performance. It was about daring to begin again. Life has a way of pulling us off course sometimes. We get lost in grief, in routine, in fear. But even in the darkest clubs, even behind the loudest music, there's always a small, quiet voice that wants more for us. And if we're brave enough to listen, we might just find our way back to ourselves. Mia did. And maybe you can too. It was supposed to be just one night out. For Daniel, 28, a quiet software developer who rarely left his apartment except for work, the idea of stepping into a packed nightclub sounded more like punishment than fun. But when his coworker Amy invited him to her birthday celebration at a downtown spot called Nova Room, he said yes. Not because he wanted to go, but because he was tired of always saying no. Daniel had spent the past year in a sort of emotional fog. After a rough breakup and the passing of his father just months apart, he had shut himself down. He worked, ate, slept, and not much else. His apartment was clean but lifeless. His phone, always on silent. Deep down, he knew he was running away from more than just people. He was running from grief, from guilt, from the voice in his head that told him he should have done more, been more. The Nova room was loud, chaotic, and far too bright for someone who hadn't socialized in months. But Amy greeted him with a tight hug and a genuine smile. "I'm so glad you came," she said. And for a moment, Daniel felt glad too. But the night didn't go smoothly. Surrounded by dancing strangers and pounding music, he felt his chest tighten. His breaths grew shallow. Panic started to set in, not for any reason he could name, just a heavy, rising dread he couldn't shake. He slipped out the side door, past the velvet ropes, and found himself alone in a dim alley near the fire exit. And that's where he met Leo. Leo was sitting on a crate, smoking, his club ID tag swinging from a lanyard. "You okay, man?" he asked, without judgment. Daniel nodded stiffly, unsure why he stayed. They ended up talking for almost an hour. About nothing at first: music, the club, how weird people could be. Then slowly, about real things. About loss. About loneliness. About the weight of feeling like you're the only one in the room who can't breathe. Leo didn't offer advice. He just listened. And sometimes that was enough. Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept coming back to the Nova room. Not for the drinks or the dancing, but for that quiet corner near the fire exit. He and Leo talked most weekends, and somewhere in those late-night conversations, Daniel started piecing himself back together. He joined a local book club, started jogging in mornings, reached out to his sister after months of silence. He even picked up the guitar again, a hobby he dropped when life got too heavy. Daniel still struggled sometimes. Healing wasn't instant, but he stopped hiding. He stopped running, and slowly, he started to live again. Some connections come out of nowhere. In a firelit alley behind a noisy club, Daniel found one that helped pull him back from the edge. Sometimes, the quietest places hold the loudest breakthroughs. Daniel hadn't planned to keep going back. The Nova room was still overstimulating. The flashing lights, the pulsing bass, the sweaty crush of people laughing and dancing as if life was weightless. But every time he reached that side exit, away from the noise, he found calm. He found Leo. And strangely, he found a piece of himself. They began to talk about deeper things. Leo shared that he used to be a touring musician, once full of ambition, until a car accident wrecked his shoulder and ended his career. "Took me a long time to realize my worth wasn't tied to what I could do," he told Daniel one night, tapping his chest. "It's tied to what I can feel and offer." Those words stuck. Daniel had spent the past year believing that because he was hurting, he was broken. Because he withdrew from everyone, he had nothing to give. But Leo saw through that. Still, Daniel had setbacks. One Saturday night, after a hard phone call with his ex, he showed up to the Nova room tense and quiet. He barely spoke. Leo noticed. "You ever think that maybe all this stuff you're carrying isn't yours to carry alone?" Leo asked gently. Daniel hesitated. "It's just when everything fell apart, I didn't know who to turn to. So I stopped turning to anyone." Leo nodded, thoughtful. "We all break. The trick is learning how to let people help put us back together." That week, Daniel did something that terrified him. He called his therapist, someone he hadn't spoken to since his father's funeral. He booked a session. He also texted Amy, thanking her for the invite months ago and asking if she wanted to get lunch sometime. "I'd love that," she replied. Each small act, each vulnerable step, chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. He wasn't fixed. He wasn't suddenly joyful, but he was moving, and that movement, however slow, felt like freedom. It was a cold Friday night in late March when Daniel found himself outside the Nova room again. But this time was different. Leo wasn't there. At first, he thought maybe Leo was running late. He waited a few minutes, hands in his coat pockets, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The alley felt colder than usual, the shadows deeper. After 20 minutes, Daniel walked inside to ask one of the bartenders. "Leo," the guy said, wiping down the counter. "Yeah, he left last week. Said he was heading out of town for a while. Needed space. Said goodbye to a few of us." Daniel didn't respond. He just nodded slowly, stepped back outside, and leaned against the wall near the fire exit alone. At first, the familiar panic crept up again. The noise of the club pushed through the door behind him. The memories came flooding in. His father in the hospital, the empty apartment, the silence after the breakup. It all rushed in like a wave. He looked around. hoping Leo would suddenly show up, lighting a cigarette, nodding his usual calm nod. But there was no one, just the hum of the city, the distant clatter of someone laughing inside. And that's when it hit him. He wasn't crumbling. He missed Leo, yes, but he didn't need Leo to feel grounded anymore. That alley had become more than an escape. It had become a place where he faced himself, piece by piece. And now, even without someone there to steady him, he realized he could do it on his own. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened the voice memos app. He hit record. March 29th, he said quietly. I'm standing where it all started, and I'm still standing. I think that's enough for tonight. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel like he was waiting to be saved. He felt like he had already started saving himself. The following week, Daniel didn't go back to the Nova room. Not because he was avoiding it, but because he didn't need it anymore. That alley, that fire exit, it had served its purpose. It was where he found his footing. And now, it was time to move forward. He started spending his Friday nights differently. Sometimes he met Amy and her friends for coffee. Other times he stayed in and practiced guitar, recording little pieces of songs he hadn't finished, but no longer felt pressure to perfect. He was reconnecting with parts of himself that had been buried beneath grief and self-doubt. He began going to therapy regularly again. Slowly, the session stopped feeling like a reminder of what was broken, and more like a space where he could celebrate the things he was learning about himself. His therapist pointed out the shift. You're not just surviving anymore, she said. You're engaging with life again. Even the people at work noticed. Daniel started opening up more, cracking quiet jokes during meetings, volunteering to help on team projects. His world was expanding. Daniel received a text from an unknown number. It was Leo. Hope you're still finding your rhythm. I'm in Austin for a bit. Needed a change of scenery. Just wanted to say, proud of you, man. Daniel stared at the message for a while, then smiled and replied, Thanks for everything. I'm doing better. Really. And he meant it. The pain hadn't vanished. The past still lived inside him, but it no longer ruled him. Daniel had found stillness in the chaos, and from that stillness, something new had grown. Resilience, trust, and the quiet confidence that he was no longer lost. He was exactly where he needed to be. Spring turned to early summer, and Daniel felt the change not just in the weather, but in himself. The days were longer now, lighter somehow, not just because of the sun, but because he no longer carried everything alone. He still passed by the Nova room sometimes. Once, he stopped across the street and looked at the alley where he used to stand, heart racing, searching for air. It wasn't just a place of panic anymore. It had become a place of turning, of choosing life again. Daniel thought about Leo a lot, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Their connection was brief, but it mattered. Sometimes, people show up in our lives not to stay, but to remind us that healing is possible, that we're worth knowing, worth saving, even if just by ourselves. He kept a voice memo he recorded that night. Sometimes he listened to it on hard days, not to relive the pain, but to remember how far he'd come. The sound of his own voice saying, I'm still standing. That line had become something of a quiet promise to himself. Life hadn't become a perfect picture, but it had texture again. He laughed more, breathed deeper, slept better, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he looked forward to things, small, simple things. A good cup of coffee, a walk at sunset, playing a song all the way through. Daniel's journey wasn't one of dramatic change. It was slow, often invisible, but it was real, and that made it powerful. Sometimes, healing doesn't look like starting over. Sometimes it's just finding one safe place to stand and deciding not to run anymore. That's what Daniel did. And if you're standing at your own fire exit, heart pounding, unsure if you'll make it through, just know it starts with a breath, a small step, a single moment where you don't turn away. You don't have to fix everything. You just have to stay. It was late December when Maya first stepped into the vault. She hadn't planned on going out that night. The cold had settled deep into the city, and everything felt quiet and empty. But it was New Year's Eve, and her roommate Cassie insisted they'd do something, anything, to break the weight that had been hanging over Maya all year. She didn't argue. After everything that had happened, losing her brother in an accident, watching her mother shut down completely, and dropping out of college just to keep herself from falling apart. Maya had stopped saying no, not because she wanted to say yes, but because saying no meant staying stuck. The vault was one of those converted warehouses that had become a nightclub. Harsh neon lights pulsed inside as people danced, laughed, and drank like nothing outside those walls mattered. Maya kept her red jacket on, even indoors. It made her feel safe, like a shield between her and everything she didn't want to face. She stayed close to Cassie at first, nursing a soda, watching the crowd with detached eyes. The music was loud, and the laughter felt distant, like she was watching a life she wasn't part of anymore. Until she saw the girl by the DJ booth. She had bright curly hair, a wide smile, and this energy that seemed untouched by the cold or the noise. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't trying to get attention. She just danced, completely in her own world. Free. Unapologetic. Maya couldn't stop watching her. Something about the girl made her feel like there was still life to step back into. Like maybe freedom didn't have to be loud or dramatic. Maybe it could just be real. Later, as the night dragged on, Maya slipped away to a quiet hallway near the bathrooms. The noise had gotten to her, and she needed a break. She leaned against the wall, pulling her jacket tighter, staring down at the concrete floor. And that's when the girl from the DJ booth appeared beside her. "You okay?" she asked gently. Maya blinked, startled, and nodded. "Yeah, just needed air." The girl smiled. "Yeah, me too. You looked like you were somewhere far away." "I think I have been," Maya said quietly. She didn't know why she admitted that. "I'm Zoe," the girl said, holding out her hand. Maya hesitated, then took it. "Maya." And just like that, a connection sparked, not loud, not dramatic, but quietly powerful. The kind that doesn't ask for anything but presence. And that was where Maya's night and her healing began. Maya didn't expect to see Zoe again. She figured that night was just one of those passing moments, brief, kind, but gone the next morning. But 3 days later, as she was walking out of the small bookstore cafe she worked at part-time, she heard a familiar voice. "Maya." She turned. There was Zoe, holding a sketchbook under one arm and a coffee in the other. Same curly hair, same easy smile. "I was hoping I'd run into you," she said. "You left before I could ask if you wanted to hang out sometime." Maya was caught off guard but smiled despite herself. "I thought I imagined that whole night." "Nope. You were definitely real," Zoe said with a grin. They started meeting up now and then. Coffee first, then walks in the park, then quiet afternoons where Zoe would draw while Maya read. It wasn't romantic, not at first. It was gentle, safe. The first real friendship Maya had allowed herself since her world had collapsed. But opening up wasn't easy. Sometimes, Maya would go quiet mid-conversation. Her mind would wander back to her brother's voice, or to the last words they exchanged before the accident. There were days she wouldn't respond to texts. Nights she'd cancel last minute with a vague excuse about not feeling well. One rainy afternoon, they sat under a covered bench near the train tracks. Zoe was sketching a tree in the distance. Maya watched the raindrops fall on the pavement like tiny, hurried dancers. "I used to think," Maya began softly, "that if I didn't talk about it, I could outrun it." Zoe didn't look up. She kept sketching, her pencil soft against the paper. "But it doesn't work like that," Maya added. "Nope," Zoe replied, "but you don't have to outrun it alone." Maya looked at her. She didn't say anything back, but something shifted inside her, something like trust, like hope, slowly returning after being gone too long. Over the next few weeks, Maya began to talk. Not all at once, not in dramatic bursts, just pieces of memory, moments of sadness. And Zoe never interrupted, never tried to fix it. She just listened. Sometimes that's all a person needs, to be heard without being hurried. And for the first time in a year, Maya felt something real growing. A quiet strength. A beginning. It happened on a Thursday evening in late January. Maya and Zoe had planned to meet at the vault. Not for a wild night, but because a local art collective was hosting a pop-up gallery in one of the converted lounge rooms. It was quiet compared to the usual crowd. The walls lined with art, soft jazz humming from speakers. Zoe had a few pieces up, a series of pencil drawings of people caught in candid, unguarded moments. Maya recognized one immediately, a sketch of herself from that rainy day near the train tracks. She stared at it, her red jacket captured in soft graphite lines, her face turned slightly away, expression unreadable, vulnerable, real. "You made me look like someone worth noticing," Maya said, her voice low. "You are," Zoe replied simply. They stood there for a while, saying nothing, but as the room began to fill, the old weight returned. The pressure of eyes, the noise building, the sense of being surrounded while still feeling unseen. Maya excused herself and stepped out into the hallway, gripping the edge of her jacket. Her chest tightened. It was happening again, her thoughts spiraling, her breath shallow, the familiar panic clawing its way in. She backed into a corner, hidden behind a curtain separating the gallery from the main club floor. Music from the other room thudded faintly, and she covered her ears. Not here. Not now. Footsteps approached. Then a soft voice, "Maya?" "Zoe." Maya didn't answer. She felt small and exposed. But Zoe didn't try to coax her out. She just sat down on the floor nearby, back against the wall. "I don't need you to talk," she said. "But I'm here. You don't have to do this alone." Maya's hands trembled. The panic didn't stop immediately, but slowly, as she sat down too, knees drawn to her chest, jacket wrapped tightly around her, she let Zoe's presence in. Let the quiet, steady rhythm of her breathing replace the pounding noise inside her head. And then Maya did something she hadn't done in over a year. She cried. Not the silent kind, not the hidden kind, but openly. Right there on the cold floor behind a velvet curtain, in the arms of someone who didn't ask her to be strong. That night, she let go of the idea that healing meant being okay all the time. Instead, she finally saw it for what it was, allowing herself to break and still be loved through it. The next morning, Maya woke up feeling raw but lighter. Not fixed, not magically healed, but different. There was no dramatic change in the sky, no movie-like moment of sudden peace. But inside, something had shifted, something small and sacred. She had finally let someone see the part of her she'd tried to hide for so long. And the world didn't end. In fact, Zoe, it felt like it had just started. For last night, for staying. Zoe replied almost instantly. You don't have to thank me. I'm proud of you. The days that followed weren't perfect. Maya still had hard mornings. She still flinched when she heard certain songs or smelled her brother's old cologne on a stranger. But she no longer shut down when it happened. She let herself feel it, name it, and then, eventually, breathe through it. She started writing again. Not for school, not for anyone else. Just for herself. Little journal entries, bits of poetry, even a letter to her brother that she never planned to send. Words that had been buried under silence were finally making their way back to the surface. At the cafe, co-workers noticed a change. She smiled more, made jokes, remembered birthdays. Even Cassie, who had grown used to Maya disappearing behind her bedroom door, started finding her curled up on the couch in the evenings, watching bad movies, laughing at dumb scenes like they used to. One evening, while walking home from the store, a little girl pointed at Maya's red jacket and said, I like your superhero coat. Maya chuckled. Thanks, she said, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe it really was something strong, something brave. The world hadn't softened, but Maya had grown stronger, softer inside, but steadier. And people noticed, not in big, dramatic ways, but in how she showed up, how she stayed, how she didn't run anymore. She was still healing, but this time, she wasn't doing it alone. Spring came slowly that year. The trees outside Maya's apartment bloomed in soft pinks and pale greens, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, she noticed. Not just saw them, but really noticed them. The way petals scattered in the breeze, how sunlight slipped between branches. It made her pause. One afternoon, she and Zoe sat on a picnic blanket in the park. They weren't doing anything special, just eating sandwiches, watching dogs chase frisbees, and letting the warmth settle into their skin. The kind of quiet that once made Maya uncomfortable now felt like peace. You're not wearing your red jacket, Zoe said with a little smirk. Maya looked down at her denim hoodie and smiled. Yeah, didn't need it today. It wasn't about the jacket, not really. It was about what it had represented: protection, walls, the version of herself that had been holding everything in. She hadn't thrown it away, but she didn't need it to feel safe anymore. Looking back, Maya could hardly believe how far she'd come, from that girl in the shadows of a nightclub, holding her breath through panic, to someone who could laugh again, love again, and trust herself with her own healing. Losing her brother had changed her. It always would, but it no longer defined her. Grief had shaped her, but it hadn't broken her. She'd learned that healing wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 quiet decisions to stay, to speak, to open up, to try again. And sometimes, all it took was one person who saw you, really saw you, and didn't turn away. Before packing up, Maya took out a small notepad and scribbled a few words, a habit she was rebuilding. On the page, she wrote, "You're not supposed to go back to who you were. You're supposed to grow into who you were meant to be." She smiled at the thought, and as the wind picked up and the sky glowed gold behind the trees, Maya knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something much better.